The question everyone is asking today are: will there be a deal to release the Israeli hostages, or will there be an operation in Rafah in the Gaza Strip? What is the Egyptian plan, and what parts can Israel agree to? Will the International Criminal Court in The Hague issue arrest warrants for Israeli officials, and did Israel neutralize a Revolutionary Guards operative in Iran? Let's dive into the details together. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what is happening in Israel on the 207th day of Israel's war with Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, the Houthis in Yemen, and their allies on US university campuses. Four major interrelated issues occupy Israel over the recent Passover holiday: the remaining hostages in Gaza, the operational activity in the Gaza Strip, specifically the possible move into Rafah, and the reported intention of the prosecutor of the ICC in The Hague to issue arrest warrants against Israel's political security elite. The IDF believes that within the next 48 to 72 hours, the decision will be made that will shape the end of the campaign in the Gaza Strip: a hostage deal with Hamas, or the IDF's entry into Rafah. In recent days, the IDF has sharpened its opposition to Israeli actions in Rafah, otherwise known as the last bastion of Hamas. This opposition is born out of the fear of the humanitarian issues which would come from operating in the small area where about 60% of the residents of the Gaza Strip are now located, on the borderline with Egypt. This is despite Israeli promises and the presentation of plans to evacuate some of the residents to safe and defined compounds in Khan Yunis and Mawasi north of Rafah. It is important to point out that the Biden administration is under tremendous pressure from its own voters, largely because of the great successes of the Hamas propaganda machine. This propaganda includes baseless accusations which are taken at face value and repeated without comment by many of the world's most prestigious media portals. The Americans know this, and so there is great concern that any incident in Rafah that results in civilian Palestinian deaths will result in even greater pressure on Israel and the administration itself, despite the legitimacy that Israel enjoyed earlier in this war. This brings us to the issue of the ICC warrants for the arrest of Israeli officials, including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, but also for senior IDF officials. The US is urging the ICC to refrain from taking this action, while several European governments are urging it to move forward with it. These are some of the diplomatic considerations. Now, let's look at the practical details. There are two main possibilities on the table at this moment. Either Hamas will release the remaining hostages, or Israel will move into Rafah. Israel has presented a very flexible and generous deal to Hamas, and it includes benefits for everyone. If Hamas refuses this deal, as it has already refused several others, we will enter a kind of impasse. Israel will be left without the hostages and also without broad support to operate in Rafah. The IDF will nevertheless have to enter the city in the southern Gaza Strip in order to dismantle the remaining Hamas battalions and hit the smuggling routes from Sinai. The IDF, for its part, has prepared for this even more. Command groups have been assembled in the last 2 days at the tactical levels of the Southern Command up to the brigade and battalion levels, mainly the regular ones, which will come from the 162nd Division and the 98th Division, which are regular army units in the IDF. Yesterday, Chief of Staff Major General Herzi Halevi approved all plans to operate in Rafah and the central districts of the Gaza Strip, and some armored units are already being moved into position. The plan includes options to pause operations to allow for renewed negotiations, or if Hamas agrees to a deal. But there is one more complicated factor, and that is the hostages, which are believed to be in tunnels underneath Rafah so that Hamas can use them as human shields. We know that an IDF move into the city will put them all in danger. And even if there is a deal this week, we can assume that the Hamas leader in Gaza, Yair Sinwar, will keep some of the hostages close to him to use as his personal human shields in the future. However, US President Joe Biden is pressing Egypt and the other mediators to pressure Hamas to accept the proposal for a hostage deal. In the last 24 hours, he spoke by phone with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and Qatari Emir Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani in two separate conversations. The White House said that Biden urged the two leaders to use all efforts to secure the release of the hostages held by Hamas, as this currently stands as the only obstacle to an immediate ceasefire and assistance to the Gazan civilians. According to the White House announcement, Biden confirmed that the US, together with Egypt and Qatar, will work to ensure the full implementation of the terms of the deal that is on the table at the moment. The broad outlines of the full deal have been released. Hamas is reported to be considering the release of 33 hostages in the first phase in exchange for a ceasefire and the release of Palestinian prisoners. In this framework, every day a hostage will be released in exchange for a day of truce. Sources close to the negotiations say that these numbers might change as negotiations continue. In the second phase, there will be a further release of hostages, possibly including the remains of some hostages who have died in captivity, in exchange for the further release of Palestinian security prisoners and a gradual return to what's described as a sustainable, peaceful restoration of the situation. One diplomatic source said this is a way of agreeing to a permanent ceasefire without calling it that. Meanwhile, in Israel, preparations are being made for the departure of the delegation of Mossad, Shin Bet, and IDF representatives at the working levels to Cairo for further negotiations. But a final decision about what they will do will only be made subject to Sinwar's answer to the proposals that have already been made. Sinwar may still be demanding clarifications on the existing proposal. The general feeling on the Israeli side is that there is reason to be optimistic regarding Hamas's answer to the Egyptian proposal, which was largely formulated with its approval. A major problem has arisen, however, because of the actions of Qatar, one of the countries trying to mediate the negotiations. Qatar has previously agreed, under American pressure, to threaten to expel Hamas leaders from their country and freeze some of their bank accounts if they did not make concessions. However, they have not followed through on these agreements, and so Hamas has not felt as much pressure to be flexible, and from what we have already learned, it will only be possible to reach a deal if Hamas gives up its demand for the withdrawal of the IDF from Gaza. In a related story, the US has continued to oppose an IDF operation in Rafah and has offered Israel various incentives. During his visit to Israel, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is expected to propose a grand bargain that has already been formulated between Washington and Riyadh, under which Saudi Arabia will receive a defense alliance with the United States' unprecedented military assistance, as well as a civilian nuclear program. Israel will receive diplomatic normalization with Saudi Arabia and most of the Muslim world, as well as the opening of new economic and commercial markets. This would bring enormous benefits to Palestinians and Israelis alike. However, despite all the incentives and the possible benefits, there are some pessimistic signs. A member of the political bureau of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad terrorist organization, Ahsan Atayya, said, "Contrary to the American statements, the proposal that is currently on the agenda is not generous at all. The unity between the Islamic Jihad and Hamas is at the highest levels. The US is lying and deceiving the world. In the current proposal, there are still significant gaps, and in 90% of the clauses, there is no change. So I rule out the possibility that we will reach an agreement. This is why we will continue to update you with the truth. So please continue to spread our videos, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. This is very helpful to what we're trying to do here and trying to get the truth all over the world so that people can join us in prayer. Switching focus now to Iran, where according to Iran International, a British-owned Persian-language media portal, Israeli operatives assassinated an Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps agent inside Iran this week. According to the report, the agent who was eliminated was involved in damaging Jewish centers in Germany. If it's true, then this assassination could be added to the targeted countermeasures carried out by the IDF last Friday using a drone on a car on the Shira Mayadon road in the Baalbek Valley in Lebanon, eliminating the 2 passengers inside the car. The 2 passengers were identified as Matzab Khalaf, a senior member of the terrorist organization Jamal Islami in Lebanon, and one of his assistants. They had both been implicated in terrorist activities directed against the Jewish state, but Israeli officials declined to comment on reports that Israel had carried out the strike on them. If you'd like to see more videos like this one and learn more about what is happening in Israel and in the Middle East, please consider making a financial donation by clicking the link on this YouTube channel or go to our website at www.tbn.org/Israel. This is a war between lies and the truth, between good and evil, and lately this war has been knocking on the doors of all of us. So it is important that together we unite in spreading the truth and in praying for the peace of Jerusalem. Next, I need to say a few words about the reports we see of anti-Israel demonstrations taking place on university campuses in the United States. This issue bothers me a lot. Let's take a look at who finances these demonstrations as well as many other activities against Israel and the West in general. An official report by the U.S. Department of Education for 2020 warned that many donations to academic institutions in the U.S. are received from sources that are openly hostile to the United States. The report also reveals that propaganda against Israel and many activities against Israel on campuses, even before the war in Gaza, were funded by generous donors from countries with ties to Hamas, primarily Qatar. Already in 2012, it was announced that the Qatari International Institution for Education, Qatar Institution, spent at least $1.5 billion to finance education initiatives at 28 universities across America and became the largest external funder of education in the US. But these donations come with strings attached, and that includes the spreading of Qatar's Islamic ideology and the Muslim Brotherhood, as well as the slandering of Qatar's enemies. The biggest targets of these propaganda campaigns is Israel. But Qatar also has other enemies that its educational programs are designed to slander, including ideologically conservative citizens of America itself, as well as Saudi Arabia, Egypt, the Emirates, and Bahrain. Additionally, many of these programs encourage the study of Islam and Arab history, but not other religions and ethnic minorities in the Middle East, such as Christians, Jews, Baha'is, Yazidis, Kurds, and Druze. So if you're wondering who is behind the demonstrations on campuses in the United States of America, ask yourself a few questions. 1. Who finances Hamas? Who spreads propaganda in favor of terrorism all over the world through the Al Jazeera network? Who finances the jihadist movements that destroyed Syria in the civil war? Who led the false negotiations between the US and the Taliban on the future of Afghanistan? Who still funds the Muslim Brotherhood all over the world? Who stole the World Cup and bribed FIFA? The answer to all of these and other disturbing questions is kata, and the time to confront this corrupt regime has come. Please continue to spread the truth, share, and follow us, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Another episode of my series, My State, will be published on social media network at the end of this week. In conclusion, this is Boots on the Ground, and I want to go back to the situation on the ground in the Gaza Strip, as well as on the northern border. Since the beginning of the war, the IDF has been working to destroy and neutralize the underground infrastructure in the Gaza Strip, and in recent weeks, IDF forces have been working to map and destroy 2 attack tunnels in the Bet Hanun area, which were under continuous intelligence and technological surveillance. Last week, 2 tunnels were destroyed, one belonging to the terrorist organization Hamas, the other belonging to the terrorist organization Fatah brigades. In Israel's northern border, fighter jets attacked targets of the Hezbollah terrorist organization in the areas of Rashia, El Fukhar, and El Hayam in southern Lebanon over the past 24 hours. Among the targets attacked were launching positions, terrorist infrastructures, and the military structure used by the terrorist organization Hezbollah in the area. In addition, IDF artillery units fired at terrorist positions in the area of Aita al-Shayeb in southern Lebanon. I want to close by paying respect to 2 heroes who fell defending Israel in yesterday's battle in the center of the Gaza Strip. Major in Reserves Ido Aviv, 28 years of age, from Carmiel, a fighter in the Armored Brigade, fell in the battle in the center of the Gaza Strip. And Major in Reserves Kalkidan Mechari, 37 years of age, from Petah Tikva, fighter in Battalion 223, Carmiel Brigade. Please take an active part in spreading the truth. Share these videos, follow us, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Please pray for the Israeli soldiers, for the situation in this region, for the civilians in the Gaza Strip and in Israel. We need to destroy this terror organization, Hamas. But on top of that, this is a spiritual war, and we need your help, we need your prayers. So please join us in prayer for this whole region and for the peace of Jerusalem.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.